One of the longest running Big Finish ranges came to an end last year, The Diary of River Song, with its 11th and 12th series. The Friend of the Family and Orphan Quartet box sets gave the series a very fun and satisfying finale, particularly Friend of the Family. That was like my favourite story of last year. That was a big 4-part epic story, as opposed to the Orphan Quartet, which had 4-hour-long stories. And now we have a follow-up series, The Death and Life of River Song, Series 1, Last Words, which, much like Friend of the Family, is its own epic 4-part story written by Robert Valentine. And the series gets off to a pretty interesting start that I honestly didn't really vibe with at first. So within a couple of minutes of the box set starting, River Song is warped out of the library. Her consciousness is extracted and put in a clone body with a 6-week lifespan because she's been hired by businessman Garrison Clay, voiced here by Greg Wise, doing a terrific job here, and is tasked with a job in order to find someone while this world is only a few weeks away from being destroyed by solar flares in the far future. It's a ticking time bomb on this planet, and she has a mission to complete. And I thought it was an interesting start because I thought this was going to be a series of stories set within the library, and the very first thing The Death and Life of River Song does is just extract her from the library, which is pretty interesting. Not the direction I would have taken the very first story post-death of River Song, but what do I know? Anyway, River Song is extracted from the library by Garrison Clay, who gives her this mission, and also is a massive fan of apocalyptic fiction, or non-fiction, should I say. Let's play a quick clip from the first story of the box set, Apocalypsis by Robert Valentine.
My private museum. I have long had a fascination with apocalyptic literature. This is my personal collection. Take a look around.
Okay, I may actually be impressed.
Whether handed down on cuneiform tablets, papyrus scrolls, illuminated parchments, or magnetic tape, every culture in history has had its own legend of global destruction. You'll also notice the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of Enoch, the Revelation of Peter, even Plato's Republic over there gave us the story of Atlantis.
The end of civilization is something all of us fear.
Some fear it too much.
Oh, says the man living underground.
Here's a more recent legend for you. A mere 3,000 years ago in the late Earth Empire period, solar flares were once again threatening the planet. So nation-state starships fled to escape the calamity and never came back. It was those who stayed and withstood the purging fires who gained the future.
Oh, I see. And that's what you're going to do.
Look about you. These aren't stories of extinction, Professor Song, but accounts of survival.
The end of one age and the beginning of another.
Precisely.
Then maybe we can get to the end of this age and you can get to the point. You want me for a job, and so far all you've shown me are books.
Oh, you've gone and preempted me. I see you recognize that one.
Oh, of course I do. I wrote it.
The Diary of River Song. My prize exhibit. 10 millennia old and in perfect condition.
A relic.
Far from it. The chronicles of one of the most remarkable women who ever lived. Someone who knew a thing or two about survival. Still a page or two left, Professor. Take it. It is yours.
So, my first issue with Last Words, I mentioned this up top, it feels so strange that her first post-library box set, not her first post-library story, because we did have one in Two Rivers and a Firewall a couple of years ago. I don't even remember what happened in that story, to be honest. It just seemed like an okay story with some weird glitchy stuff happening in the library. I genuinely hardly remember anything about it. But it's strange that the very first box set post-library is just immediately wrenching River Song from that library. And one of the big emotional motivators for River Song in this box set is that she needs to get back home to her family. She needs to get back into the library because her family is going to be missing her. And the fact that we don't have any sort of connection to that family, we don't know what she's been doing for the thousands of years that she's been in the library, because this is 61st century Earth, so there's been like thousands of years that she's been in the library for, and she's been wrenched out of that. Like, the main thing we know that she's been doing in those like thousands of years in the library is playing rounders, and that's an actual plot point towards the end of the story. Apart from that, we hardly have any sort of connection or any sort of concrete, like, emotional tether to that library. So when River's like, I need to go back to my family, I miss my family, we don't feel it, like, at all. That being said, Last Words, this epic 4-part story where River Song is given her diary, a fake identity, and a sonic screwdriver to go to 61st century Earth in order to track down, at the behest of this evil businessman, Garrison Clay, is trying to find a scientist called Balthazar. She's not been told who he is, what he's famous for, or even what Garrison wants with him. She's just been sent onto 61st century Earth a few weeks before solar flares are going to destroy the planet and people are hunkering down in bunkers. Garrison himself is several kilometers down underground in Australia, but apparently that's not even going to save him from the strength of the solar flares in a few weeks' time. And River has to try and track down Balthazar and bring him back to Garrison. And this epic 4-part adventure goes from set piece to set piece, some really great, interesting characters who we spend a lot of time with, some really terrific dialogue set pieces as well. There's some really strong stuff, particularly in the first few episodes, with River Song's relationship with artificial intelligence and robots. She's got a really fun and endearing relationship with a taxi driver, an AI robot taxi driver called Peavy, played by Jamie Zuberi, and it's just a really nice, endearing relationship where the AI know that they're going to be killed, or they're going to be one of the first people killed by the solar flares because it's going to destroy all of their electronics and the mainframe and everything, and they get sort of resigned to it. And because they're resigned to it, they decide to be really nice to everyone, because that's, you know, the best thing you can do as you face the end of the world. And there's a really great scene where River's trying to infiltrate a university to try and find Balthazar, and the only person there is a cleaning robot. And she has a really fun exchange with it that reminded me of Rick and Morty's, like, well, what is my purpose? You pass butter. Oh my god. There was a scene a little bit like that when she's trying to, like, negotiate with this cleaning robot. And it's like, what do? I clean. That's all I do. Are you connected to the mainframe? Of course, how else would I clean? There's some really great scenes like that. And there's scenes like that throughout all of the 4 hours. Like, it's interesting that River's got this strange relationship with technology that the Doctor would detest. The Doctor doesn't like artificial intelligence or robots and machines for the most part. I'm reminded of The Invasion when he tries to communicate with that automated answering machine message. It's like, oh, you stupid machine, and like kicks it. It's stuff like that. But River's got a really interesting dynamic with it, a really strange, empathetic one. I don't know if it has to do with her time in the library or if it's this extra character development that they've honed throughout years of previous Big Finish box sets, but either way, that really stood out to me here. That was really good. Alex Kingston's terrific throughout the whole box set. I think Greg Wise is a really deliciously fun villain. If I was in this about to be apocalyptic future Earth, I'd probably end up following Garrison Clay. He's got such charisma and charm. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weak like that. I'll only play one more clip, and this is from part 2, Fate and Fatality, where River's hunt for Balthazar takes her into essentially a simulated reality, kind of similar to the library in a sense. There's some interesting like duality with the themes happening here from the home that she is trying to get back to. In order to do that, she has to go into this other simulated world of this essentially this Agatha Christie crime thriller she finds herself in, trying to track down Balthazar, and she takes up another identity, another musical themed name. Let's play a quick clip from Fate and Fatality.
Our new vicar certainly peppers his morning service with more fire and brimstone than old Reverend Stillingfleet ever cared to.
Yes. Rather disturbing, actually.
I didn't quite recognize the reading either. Do you suppose the man's a Calvinist?
I couldn't say, dear lady, but the passage did seem familiar.
Perhaps our new neighbour might give us her thoughts on the matter. Mrs. Limerick?
Good morning, Lady Wembridge.
Good morning. Oh, do forgive me. Mrs. Limerick, may I present Mr. Bartholomew?
Madam.
Sir.
Mr. Bartholomew is another recent settler to Chaseborough after several years abroad. He's now engaged in helping to organise my library.
Oh, You're a librarian, Mr. Bartholomew.
Hardly, madam. And you?
Mrs. Limerick is my new tenant.
So you've taken Farm Cottage.
That's right. It's small, but it suits my needs.
And what brings you to the district?
Hunting, actually.
Oh? What game?
Retired scientists.
How interesting.
Mr. Bartholomew has an interest in science, don't you, sir?
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, dear lady.
No? Then how far would you go?
Oh, it's a mere passing interest, nothing more.
Mr. Bartholomew, when he isn't scouring my library for obscure texts, he occupies most of his free time with astronomy, Mrs. Limerick.
Oh, really?
So what's interesting about this simulation is that Bartholomew is played by Andrew James Spooner, and the mystery isn't so much, is this Balthazar? I think it's pretty clear early on that this is Balthazar, but it's the case of, is he playing a role here? Is he deep in character, or is he an extra extension of this simulation? And that is the more interesting mystery at the heart of the Fate and Fatality Part 2 of this story, which results in this really interesting moral dilemma at the heart of it. You heard there in that clip as well, Lady Mary Wembridge, played by Issy Van Randwyck, who's so good in this particular episode as well. There's this really lovely, unrequited love story at the heart of this as well, between Lady Mary and also Bartholomew here. Well, maybe it's not unrequited. Well, that would be slight spoilers, but this really fascinating apocalyptic ethical dilemma, which also ties into a important historical chapter of Earth's future in the Doctor Who chronology that fans of the classic series in particular will be well acquainted with, which places this story and its events in a really interesting part of the timeline that I think enhances those stories. There's some, if you're, I think even hinting at it, I think even hinting at what season or what Doctor it was would give the game away a bit too early. It's a really great twist, and it also allows the Death and Life of River Song Last Words box set to really continually change the stakes and what type of box set it is as it's going along. The first two is an investigative murder mystery story where River Song is trying to find these clues and find the breadcrumb trail. So a really effective use of of the breadcrumb trail, where it seems like there's some other third parties who are trying to push her in the right direction, and also another group who are trying to hinder her as well. These really complex, sprawling, opposing factions that are trying to either help or hinder her. That adds a lot of complexities to the story. There is another agent here who is trying to follow her along, and there's some interesting commentary on religious zealotry in the end of the world, and I think it was an interesting wrinkle, but I think it could have been fleshed out a little bit more. I thought that the character who this is emphasized with was a little bit one note, but then in the second half of the story, River Song becomes friends with this other person on the cover, Jamie Parker, playing Sam, who is a scorned scientist who is trying to figure out what happened to his deceased love and try and get vengeance on her behalf, which takes the story into some pretty interesting directions. Like I said, the canon of Doctor Who, it's a pretty important event in Earth's history. So, I think classic series fans will be well served with the Death and Life of River Song Last Words box set. It's a really interesting and engaging and thematically enthralling 4-part story. I don't know if it is Friend of the Family good, but of course that shouldn't be the barometer for success here, because Friend of the Family is an incredibly exceptional story. But Last Words is a very, very strong pre-apocalyptic thriller mystery story that has more akin with Melody Malone mysteries than it does a conventional sci-fi River Song story. It's got really great characters, lots of strong dynamics and interactions and interpersonal relationships peppered throughout it, and I won't play any clips from parts 3 and 4, The Black Hours and Book of the Dead respectively, because that's fully spoilerific territory, but it goes in some really fascinating directions. Alex Kingston is terrific with the material. Her performance is really strong throughout all of it. She's clearly still invested and in love with the River Song character that she's been playing for about 15 years now. for about 16 years now, and the character is still going strong. And with the Death and Life of River Song, it's a bit of a strange place to open a post like death library story for River Song, like immediately wrenching her from that setting and not really doing much legwork to establish that library life. However, hopefully future box sets might be able to expand on that some more. I'm not going to say what the status quo is at the end of the Death and Life of River Song, but in a way that still kind of works in its favour, because we are in uncharted territory for the character, because we all know in previous Diary of River Song box sets that all roads lead to the library and River Song's death. So what happens after that? Big Finish have got pure artistic license here. This could have been an actual death of the character, or, you know, just another afterlife or something. Big Finish have got a lot more creative freedom, I think, now with the River Song character, with these new stories post-library, and I'm really interested in what they do with that freedom. And I think that the past few River Song box sets have been so strong, like Two Rivers and a Firewall, Friend of the Family, and the Orphan Quartet. These are like some really terrific box sets, and with this new format change, I think we're going to get some more terrific ones in future. So yeah, Last Words is really, really good. It's one of my favourite box sets of 2024 so far, actually. I just love how it's like, yes, this is a 4-hour epic, and we're going to change settings like every 30 or 40 minutes, and we're going to flesh out those settings, and it's going to be full of rich, eclectic characters who River Song has distinct and memorable interpersonal relationships and dynamics with. And yes, we're going to stick the landing on almost everything. Robert Valentine's done a terrific job here. Yeah, very few notes. Like I said, we got off a little bit on the wrong foot, because I just think that you should have done a lot more to set up River's library, afterlife, and relationships. Maybe Last Words would have worked better as the second box set of the Death and Life of River Song. But you work with what you're given, and this is great stuff.